be eating my salad.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just chill. I mean, this is really like ad hoc, you know. I think it's beneficial to see practitioners who are at a pretty fucking high level of understanding just be people, because like the professional image graft marketings like this like, oh, I have to put my pontiff hat on now, like it's like there's something to the reality that like we've gotten away from wanting to just be people, and then we constantly market this new form of people,
Yeah,
like, oh, I'm this kind of person. It's like,
I know.
right. So you can market it on Instagram. You're like, you're the person with the big booty in the yoga pants at the gym on Instagram. But you're just a person too, it's like, but it's like, no, you're like a character of a person that you play. You play yourself on TV, right? It's like,
Totally.
and
Totally.
yeah, and so I'm looking at that and how when people are very deeply in trauma or very deeply in an ingrained defensive position, which is an addiction, but it's an ingrained defensive. These are the 5 preferred states that I can be in only.
Yeah.
Right? These are the 3 preferred states, and anything outside those states is terrifying, right? Right? Because our
These
brains
are the limits I'm talking about
yeah,
not being interested in cooperating.
yeah, right. And so there's something about when people come and they're terrified of the more than 2 or 3 options that they are used to, right? They're terrified of the menu. The
Yeah,
menu of options is too crazy for them. They
yeah.
don't know how to internalize their own menu of options to go, oh, well, I could just tweak the brightness setting on this option and like change the color. And then suddenly it's like a whole new option, right?
Yeah.
Um, but then they come to practitioners who sort of seem to have their shit together, or at least maybe they do. I mean, I don't know if I have my shit together, but the point is that like I'm playing the game at a pretty high level, right? And so are you.
Yes.
I'm playing this menu option game inside my neurochemical factory really at a high level. And then sometimes I am just tired and I have to crash. But the point is that I'm playing I'm like really like, okay, trying to be a human, not be an asshole, but also like, what the fuck is human, But I'm also not necessarily trying to play a character so that you believe that I'm this character forever, because then I'm trapped in the character I play.
Totally. 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 100%. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and the more people you have around you, or the more people who are in relationship to you, the more you become trapped in that character to a certain degree, because the more their projections from your initial projected character and their interpretation of that forms a meta network essentially of who you then are. And what's ironic to me is that at an earlier part of the maturation process, we count on that to become
Yeah,
who
totally.
we are. Like, we need that, right? That's part of the
Yeah, yeah.
reflective device that allows us to form a resonant and contrasting sense of self. But then at some point, we don't want that anymore, because we recognize that those boxes, even if there's 20 of them,
Yeah.
even if there's 50 or 100, that those boxes can no longer hold the infinite permutations that our expression is trying to express constantly.
Constantly. Right. It's like there's something in improv or clowning in which when we act in a certain way in this kind of fabricated game, it's like, okay, so we're going to play a game in which we are changelings or shapeshifters, right? So already I'm going to create this meta narrative in which like the game is that the 2 or 3 actors on the stage are not actually human, or they are, but they have this special power. And they have this special power like almost like a chameleon, right? Like a superpower where they can shapeshift and then they can come back and then they can shapeshift again. And in fact, this shapeshifting is almost like the autonomic nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're breathing automatically, your heart's beating automatically. Now imagine if you were a creature who autonomically, while you are just living your life, your arm just changed into a butter knife, and then and then there were butterflies coming out of your head, but then they went back, like, but it's like, okay, so we can imagine that because we see cartoons and science fiction, right? We go, oh, this person's rules are different. They kind of morph and change, and it's just like, whatever. But then we don't understand that that's actually the true reflection of what's happening.
Totally.
And then we get stuck, and then the actor or the play, right, or the speculative fiction author or something has to prioritize the game of going, right, so I have to not only let myself do that honestly, like this kind of blah blah blobbiness, right, like, oh, now I'm purple, now I'm zero, now I'm a dragon, now I'm not a dragon, like whatever. And it's not even that the labels are important, because the labels aren't important. It's the act of the process not being dampened, right?
Totally.
So not only do you have to say, well, that's okay, and I permit my system to do the thing it wants to already do. You have to give you the real permission and go, oh, this is kind of terrifying, but also it's kind of cool. Not only do you have to do that, you have to constantly give other people the opportunity to do that.
Totally.
So I don't know which one is more difficult, but I'm trying to play the game in which it's like, I have to keep unblocking my so-called boundary of, am I able to just let myself have this sort of autonomic, shape-shifting, magical, reflective nonsense quality that I am, but without labeling any of it, because then it gets problematic. But you just go, okay, this is just happening, and then happens. But you have to give other people the opportunity to do that too. And what I think is that what I've done is I've excluded myself from the world so that I can be that person as 24/7 as possible.
Yeah.
But then when I go into sort of like normal situations, you actually can feel the like corseted quality of people. Like
Yes.
they've got collars on, corsets, like their clothes are too tight, but it's not the clothes. It's like there's this psychic corseting,
Yes.
right? That's always like, I can't really, just like be a woman, or I can't really be my full erotic self, or like, I can't be whatever the fuck label you put it. But the point is, they're constantly going like, I can't, and you can't. And if you do, then I get angry at you because you gave yourself the permission that I didn't give myself.
Totally, 100%. Yes, and I would say in addition to that, because of that core or fundamental corseting, at whatever level people are doing it, because some people are doing it closer to the bottom, so to speak, other people are doing it more at the surface level. But I think in reaction to that corseting, you also have the whole host of reality fields and personalities that are formed from the reaction of the restriction itself. And so
Yeah.
that's what you're often dancing with.
Yeah.
And I think in the 25 years that I've been doing this work and sitting with people, thousands of them, because at the center we had tens of thousands of people. And I was working with the layers of that. So not just the client, but how the client was coming through the practitioners, and then how the practitioners were doing that same meta dance with each other and with me in my own permission, that they were coming to me to grant to them, that then they were pissed that I was granting. And so there is all of these pieces that you're speaking about that happen in this giant landscape. And it's fascinating though, because once your discernment picks up the frequency or the ways of those layers or those actions and reactions, in some ways what happens is the whole soup of them, for me at least, gets thrown out. Like I stop seeing some of those things. They just don't, they go right through me because my system is automatically zeroing in on the thing that is actually being corseted
Yeah.
or the thing that is really being said because of what's being corseted.
Yeah,
And then I get into the whistleblower status.
yeah, right,
Then
right,
I'm in the place where I'm deciding, do I say the thing? Is
yeah,
it appropriate to say the thing? Do I still just play the game as if I'm playing it with you? And ha ha, maybe you think I'm playing it too, but really I'm dying here because I got to get the fuck out of here because I'm not playing the game and I'm itchy when I'm not playing the game.
That's right. That's right. Right. It's you've got the scratchy polyurethane sweater on from 1975 or whatever, where it's just like, how did people wear these clothes and
I
not
don't know.
scream all the time?
I don't
Yeah, right.
know.
These synthetic, like plastic, like clothing where you're like, oh my God, get me out of here. I just want to go home and rip off all my clothes. Just
Totally.
yeah, but it's like I think it's interesting because this Hall of Mirrors quality is both a fun house that we have fun when we do it on purpose.
Yes.
So like, okay, there's my reactions to my own reactions. There's your reactions to my reactions to my reactions. There's my reactions to your reactions to your reactions. And then there's all the permutations of the reactions to each other. So
Yes.
it's like, okay, that's fun when it can be fun. That's
Yeah.
fun when we all kind of agree, okay, I'm going to the haunted house tomorrow. I'm buying the ticket and I'm going to go into the fun house and suddenly there's 75 of me and 75 of you and they're all grotesque and we go, oh my God, this is so weird. And I'm kind of laughing, but also no, I don't like it. You know, you go and when you agree that the funhouse mirror cosmogram is the thing we're doing, then it's okay, oh, this is the thing we're doing, and I have a schema for that.
Yeah. And the spirit of it is different.
Right, the spirit of it.
That's it. The spirit of it is
Attitude.
different.
There's an attitude shift, you know. It's like, oh, okay, so we're going to this restaurant, not that restaurant. Which
Yes.
is to say, I'm going to this attitude. I need to have this kind of ability to shift into this attitude state. And if
Yeah.
you can, you can. And if you can't, you go, well, I'm not going to go to that restaurant today because they play music too loud and I don't want to have loud music today. But that's, you know, that's really what's happening. But then there's this other quality where it's like, what we try to do, or what Westerners or modernists or just control freaks are always trying to do, is to go, I didn't buy a ticket to this fun house. And it's like, well, now we're getting to a level of non-dual relationship where you have to kind of go, right, but you have the ticket and you're in the fun house, whether you bought it or not consciously, because now we're talking about, well, did I really consent to this? It's like, okay, now is not the time for that conversation.
That conversation was like 100 steps back.
Yeah, right. But this was what seems to happen, because whenever you wake up is when you wake up in the
Right.
dream, right? So the dream of reality, which is like, oh, I'm 13, I'm 75, I suddenly wake up to the fact that maybe I'm gay, or that I've been corseting, or that you're reacting to the thing that I was 25 years ago. You know, whenever you wake up in the dream world is whenever you wake up. And the thing that I think is this culture shock for people, it's like a kind of meta culture shock. It's like when you wake up in the dream, there isn't like a concierge that walks up to you with a kind of titrated sequence of realizations to go, okay, now that you've woken up, we're going to take it one baby step. There's no, it doesn't work. What happens is you wake up into the totality at the same time, and you go,
Totally.
I didn't buy a ticket to this fun house. There's 75 mirrors around me. I only want one at a time. That's where people get stuck, I think, because they start to think about consent and boundaries and harm reduction. And it's like, no, that you're on the top of the roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
You know, like, this is not the actual time and place to have these abstract conversations about what you did or didn't decide to do, you're in the fucking playing ground. Like you're in the soccer match World Cup, but that's when you woke up, you know, like whatever. You woke up wherever you woke up. You were on the top of the roller coaster. You were in the middle of a war. You were having sex. You woke up where you woke up and you go, fuck, this is too much. I hate it. And then there's, I think, a cascade of problems that start to happen at that
Oh
moment.
God, I'm just dying. It's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
good. What
Yeah.
you're saying is so true. It's so good. And it makes me think about the moment I woke up
Yeah.
and like how what followed from that and how much of a total true shit show that was. And how partially that was a shit show because the preparation for waking up that had been sold to me was so not accurate for what
Yeah,
waking
right,
up
right. Not
actually
accurate.
is.
Yeah, yeah.
And what was amazing to me was that the communities where waking up should have been a given, where it should have been, I could have gone to those communities and people would have been able to say, oh, yes, all the things you just said, like you're here, this is this, right? There was none of that in those communities. And what I found, which was really disappointing, is that 80 of the percent of the people in those communities hadn't fucking woken up.
Yeah, right. Totally. Right.
So then all of a sudden, the people who I thought were like leading me or teaching, suddenly they couldn't help anymore.
No, no, no.
And I think it is particularly potent when you wake up at the intersection of different crossroads. Some people wake up in one paradigm. They wake up to their Buddhism. They wake up to their church.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
wake up to their intimate relationships. But when you wake up to the whole fucking relational foundation of reality, there's not so many people who span those intersections who can look at why your waking up looks that way because of your chemistry, your ancestry, your personal psychological history, your practice that you did to get you to the
That's
waking
right.
up.
The vehicle you drove through
The
over the
vehicle
cliff.
you drove,
like,
yes.
like, did you drive over the cliff in a motorcycle or a horse? You know, like,
Totally. And this matters, right?
totally.
For real, like in reality, these conditions, they matter.
Yeah.
And they have big clues to what happens after the waking up and how you either put it back together, whatever the fuck that means, or you don't put it back together, but how you navigate it relationally has everything to do with those conditions. And we should be doing better at looking at that and understanding it, because the reality is consciousness is going to keep waking itself fucking up through us, whether we give consent or not, because consent is a stupid human idea that we have anything in charge of what consciousness is doing through the vehicle of our body.
Yeah.
Come on, that's so arrogant.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, this is where we're stuck, because, and this is what I'm trying to sort of do research on now. So here's an interesting thing. So when I started to have chronic pain and my disease started like really coming online when I was 29 or 28 or 29, I started to notice I would have really this chronic pain. And I grew up with a mother who was disabled, who had like a broken back. She wasn't paralyzed, but she was, you know, her spine was fused, and she had chronic pain. And so when I was a kid, I didn't really know what she was going through on a conscious level. You know what I mean? Like I kind of saw all the external symptoms, and I was kind of weirdly empathic enough to know that like there were worlds within worlds within worlds happening. And that's what created the external behavior set, right?
Yep.
So this is me as a kid going, I'm lost in and you know, because I was a really psychic child. I was really fucked up, you know, like I was just like, oh, you know, seeing things all the time and being like, I don't know how to deal with any of this. But the point is that when I started to have my disease like sort of manifest in this particular way. Because if you think about the disease as consciousness as well, it was already always there, latent in the system, going,
Totally.
well, I'm going to wake your ass up someday, and here it is, you know, like, here's the vehicle. Here's the
Yeah.
vehicle. So
Yes.
part of my vehicle has been like near death and disease and pain. But what I'm trying to sort of say is that when I was 28, 29, and I started to notice this chronic pain, I started to do research because I had already gone to like massage therapy school. So I kind of had some idea of pain syndrome, syndromal mechanoreceptor issue, right? Like, okay, so there's a kind of neurobiological, neurophysiological component to pain that can be shifted through sort of like mechanical, like mechanical interruption, right?
Yes.
Like you could press on a point
Yes.
that hurts and suddenly the pain changes and then it's not pain anymore. What the fuck is going on, right? So I had
Yes.
some idea of like the acute interruption of the pain sensation, the perception of pain, to go, oh, this is weird. This is like a psychic event. This isn't like actually material. Like on some level, it's not like this is a rock. It's like, no, this is like jelly that changes when you put your attention on it.
Yes.
So I had an idea of that. I started doing more research, and it turns out back then the research had not caught up really. There was a group though in Australia who's still doing amazing work. They're called the NOI group, and they talk about explaining pain and exploring pain and how it's kind of like this fucking psychedelic thing. Like it's just like,
The Noetic Institute?
no, it's NOI group. It's not the Noetic Institute. It's a
Okay.
different group, but it's
Okay.
NOI and it stands for something. But basically, they're like super geek neuroscientists about pain, right? But the,
Yep.
the funny thing is like I looked at what they were doing. It gave me like a really great baseline to be like, oh, so there's this perception thing that is kind of like taking drugs when it comes to pain signal. You kind of start to see something, and then if you choose to believe it, oh, now
Right.
you're in trouble.
You're screwed.
You're true. So what I did to get out of that first hump of chronic pain, which was a perception shift, was I have to move anyway, because if I'm going to have pain regardless, so it was like an equation. Pain was the constant, not the variable.
Yes.
I said, if pain is the constant, and this is what gives me chills, because it was like one of the waking up moments, which was practical. It was highly practical. It was, let's say in this equation, pain is the constant, not the variable, which means I can't get rid of it, right? Like
Yes.
it means that I can't actually cure it, but what
Yes.
I can do is I can have other variables around it.
Yes.
So, and I thought about my mother and I was like, oh, right, I'm actually trying to solve my mom's problem in the
That's
future,
right.
right? Like I'm doing this weird ancestral thing, but also it's my problem because now I have it, right?
Yes.
So I would go, well, if pain is the constant and it's in the constant every equation, if the variable is movement or paralysis, like
Mhm.
staying still and not moving because it's hurting, I go, oh, well, I'd rather move and have pain than have pain and not move.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what sort of got me over the hump, which was to
Mm-hmm.
go, I can do it. It's
Yep.
just going to hurt.
Totally. Well, and in many ways, I think that you wound up undermining the helplessness variable within that.
Yeah.
You know, like in those two pieces of just relating to it as the constant, you already undermine the helplessness because you're like, oh, fuck, like I've surrendered to this. This is the variable that I can't, or it isn't changeable and isn't changing. And then the other piece about like, I can either stay stuck in it or I can move. You give yourself that power, so to speak. And I think, you know, at the beginning of this conversation, when you talk about like the trauma body and being stuck in the trauma body, so much of that has to do with being stuck in that helplessness, being stuck in that overarching rehearsed helplessness. And we can call it victimhood or whatever. It doesn't matter what the
Yeah.
label is, but the reality is it feels like it is in a movable force. And a lot of times that immovable force feels that way because it has been transmitted through multiple generations before you
Right.
have gotten to the place where you are looking at it and saying, is this immovable?
Yeah.
Shouldn't I be able to live beyond this? Like something's not right
Right.
here, right?
Right.
That's like 5 generations of that.
Right, right. Because at a certain point, it's the glacier you meet on your Arctic journey, and you go, well, I'm not going to be able to melt this glacier, but the glacier is melting slowly.
Yes.
And you go, well, that's actually the cognitive shift, which allows you to kind of not feel like the glacier is doing something to you as a personal attack.
Exactly.
It's just like, oh no, this is like a meta context that I'm inside of, but also like moving through,
Yes.
like it's a landscape. It's not a problem anymore. Although
Yes.
you might not like the landscape because the landscape hurts or is like on fire or something, right? And
Yeah.
so it's like a meta narrative shift. But then once you get to the meta narrative shift, you can start to go into sort of like different wormholes within the psychic, meta narrative of whatever it is you're talking about.
Yes.
Because at that point, you've created this kind of blank canvas that's not totally blank. Like you have a setup, you have a prompt, just like in theater. You have a prompt, but the prompt is what now gives you more options because you bounce off the prompt.
Yeah,
You
totally.
go, well, if it is a glacier, what do I need to do? Like you go, okay, so the scene that we're playing is that there's a glacier. Okay, so like, you know what I mean? It's
I
like you you
do.
you play this kind of game internally, which is not really about control, but is more about play. It's
Yeah.
more about, if these are the givens, what can I do with the givens?
Yeah. And I would throw in one more variable there, which is that for some individuals, that's what they wind up doing with their addiction. Is
Yes.
that they create that as an immovable variable, and it has a lot of story around it, which our system also supports, right? You are sick, this is a disease, right? Like there's a whole bunch of supportive structure for that variable to be immovable, and people then create an entire life around the supposed immovability of that.
Right.
And what has been continually frustrating to me is that many times that is a false immovable variable.
Oh, totally. Right.
And so what happens is, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this, is that you get to the place where now there's enough freedom to move that variable, and now you're really stuck because an entire life has been built, sometimes 10, 20, 50 years around this being the immovable variable.
Right, right,
And
right.
so now real freedom is here, which is something that offers possibilities of life and livelihood and existence that goes beyond that entrenched way. And it becomes very problematic to part with that thing.
Yeah.
Very.
Right. Like when you're talking, it's like, because I can see how it's sort of like this. It's like in science fiction, and this is because like life is science fiction, so I just use it all the time. But it's like, imagine you create like an artificial sun. The sun is the
Exactly.
immovable stability of which all the planets orbit around,
That's
right?
right.
But let's say that you grew up on this, like these planets, but the artificial sun was built 10 billion years ago, and
Yes.
your lifespan is only like 100 years. To the person coming down the line, the moment that the artificial sun stops working, it's an apocalypse.
That's right. To 100%. I love that.
But if you go back in time, the originators of the artificial sun, they always knew it was going to end because
One,
it was artificial.
it was artificial. I mean, this is what I talk about with that building of the second nervous system, right? That you can have more than one central channel.
That's
And
it.
that second central channel, and we had this discussion in my teaching group 2 weeks ago about whether like somebody who has DID could have like 5 or 7 central channels,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Like could each of those altars have their own, and I don't
Yes.
know because I haven't seen it, and I can
Yeah.
only say what I have truly seen.
Yeah, I
And
get
what I have truly seen is that over and over again, there is a second trauma-based central nervous system that is networked and vibrant and alive and has its own cognition
That's
and
right.
its own agendas and
Mhm.
its own rooting in the earth, and it is not in truth.
That's right.
And until you get to the place where you are so at the base, where you are looking at the truth, you will not know the difference, and neither will any of the thousands of practitioners that you are employing to get you out of it.
That's right. Right. Because at a certain point, the illusion is so intoxicating.
Yes, it's so embodied.
Yeah,
It's so embodied. And yet, if you really become discerning about frequency and true frequency that is coming through somebody with a clear channel, you immediately know that's not the thing.
totally.
And your attention and nervous system knows it's not the thing.
That's right.
Even if you don't know it up here, your body starts to drop out.
Yes.
Your body in relationship with it starts to drop out
Totally.
because it isn't connected in truth.
No,
It isn't connected in the real natural source of its connection.
no.
Yeah.
And then this is actually why I stopped doing private sessions, like a year or two ago.
Because you were getting tired and falling asleep.
Well, not only that, but like, I just want to like map it out, because it's like, if you say the word trauma healing now, what you're actually telling people, the narrative that people come to is, I need this second false nervous system validated by a professional.
Totally. That's when I leave the session.
That's when it's a problem. Because the issue that I see with Western PTSD trauma healing is that they're not quite ready to understand interdependence and impermanence together at the same time, which is like the non-dual field, which is to say everything's dying, but also it's not really a problem, and you just have to not fight it. And also everything's connected, even the things you don't want to be connected to. So just get over it, like just get over it. Here's a million techniques to get over it, because you're actually the problem. Like, you are the problem. Your resistance to interdependency is the problem in the field you're angry about. It's like, oh, okay. So, and this is like the hard but funny truth, which is why it's like I've transitioned to some kind of like Bill Hixian stand-up routine. Like I'm basically just doing stand-up therapy on the internet, because it's the only way people can understand the sort of science fictional reality that we're actually in, which is to say, you can, for 100 lifetimes, really tell me you are who you say you are. Like you are really hurt, and you are really sad, and you are really helpless, and you are really fucked up, and you are really, like you are really, and I have to go look around at the stage and go, we're still in the improv, right? Like we're still in the improv. Because at a certain point, it's like everyone's forgotten we're in the improv, except I have to go, right, but my practice has primed me to go, no, still in the improv. It's just gotten so weird that okay, we're still in the improv, but now you're playing the improv that you don't know you're in the improv.
Exactly.
And it's refreshing when you can laugh at it, but it's also deeply frightening when the person in front of you really, really believes it.
Oh, I know.
Because now you're like, okay, you're not playing anymore.
No.
You're not having fun with your improv anymore. You're actually really believing that like this is oh fuck, like we're like, because now their reality field starts to affect yours.
I know.
You start to go, this is like the artificial sun is becoming a black hole.
Totally.
And I don't want to go into the black hole, but I can see the event horizon because you're generating it.
Totally. This happened to me. It doesn't happen to me as often as it used to, because I think of where I am in relationship to it now. I have more span to play even within those
Right,
confines.
right, totally. Yeah, yeah.
I still get to choose whether I want to play the game within those confines or not,
That's
but
super important. You have to be able to have the choice to go, is the best thing right now for me to kind of go along with the story this child
exactly.
is telling me?
Yes, exactly. And I would say about 6 months ago, I got referred somebody for like a one-time consultation, and they came through somebody who had worked with me years ago and had a lot of success.
Okay.
And so they came with a lot of hope and a lot of assumption.
Oops.
Within the first 6 minutes, I was aware of everything you just said. I was like, oh, this person isn't, they have been so trauma therapied that they believe that this is so real. And so I start reality testing that with people. Like
Mhm.
I start doing all sorts of things that I do to see how strong the reality field is for that individual and how married they are to that reality
That's right.
field,
How much are they invested in it?
which essentially tells me their emotional and evolutionary age.
Mm,
Because wherever, however they're glued to it, if they're glued to it too strongly, their emotional age is too young to work with me.
that's right.
It's
That's right.
not because I can't do the work with them, it's because I no longer want to.
That's right. It's a
Because
desire-based
because
like
because it makes
play.
me want to die.
Yeah, totally. Let's just be honest. It
The
sucks
parts of
so
me
hard.
start dying. They start dying right there and then. So
Yeah.
I start reality testing this person, right? I'm poking in 50 directions
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
this is what I do, right? And I do it very like, with a lot of integrity, but I'm looking, I'm seeing, and they are checking every fucking box of like this is their truth.
Yeah,
And the worst is that they work in the world of social justice.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, this
And
is the
so
thing. Yeah.
because they work in that world, this is like when I work with long-term meditators
Yeah.
or people who are deeply spiritual with 50 years of practice. They have all the language to defend it. And so because they have the language, because it's been road tested through that system, because they know themselves in truth so strongly in that place,
So sad. So
I
sad.
am the fucking enemy.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
am the enemy, and they are going to make anybody they hire the enemy if
Right.
that person goes for the center that they're defending and begging you to unlock.
That's right. That's the
And
problem.
I played that game in the
Right.
early
Right.
years when I worked with eating disorders and I worked with people with borderline personality.
Yeah, yeah, whatever. All these things, which is
All this
basically the same
bullshit.
thing. It's all
It's
the
the
same
same
thing.
thing. It's
Yeah,
the
it's
same thing. And back then I was still learning. And so I learned, but no more, because that is a waste of my time because they are playing a game with me that they think they're outwitting me in, that I have to let them think they're outwitting me in because they're too fucking fragile to handle the real game. And
yeah,
that's what I actually want to tell them is go see somebody else
yeah,
and get less fragile. And then you can come back and we'll play
that's
the
right.
game.
That's it.
And
Yeah,
that's
and
what I
it's
often do tell them.
that's the thing is like instead of rejection, you have to understand it's like if I go to a cross, like here's the thing about fragility. It's not like a sin and it's not like a weakness, really. It's like it's really just matching. You have to match your capacity with the capacity building paradigm that you're entering. So if
One,
I go into a CrossFit studio, I'm going to get fucking hurt because my system can't deal with the things that they do because there's a different like historical and not just like history big time, but like history small, as in like those people are primed for a certain kind of thing that
yes,
my system isn't primed for. It doesn't mean I'm like weaker than them. It
yes,
just means if you put them in the place that I'm really good at, they would also get injured.
yes, exactly.
So
And
this is the thing. It's like well, if I go try to do CrossFit games, I'm going to get fucked up and it's just going to be bad. And they're going to be like, well, you're not ready. And I'm going to have to go, yeah, you're right. I'm not ready. But we often don't think about that the other way around, which is
Yeah.
you go see a medicine person who can really fucking play with identity and go, oh, I'm not who you think I am. And I'm going to keep changing and I'm going to
Yes.
keep fighting. If your psychological CrossFit, is not up to task,
Yes.
you are going to fucking ball up in a fetal
That's
position
right.
and go become more of an addict.
Yes, which essentially, to just capitalize on what you're saying, I mean, that's what happens when people are going to take fucking ayahuasca
Oh,
to
totally.
go
Yeah, yeah.
fix the thing, or even like a major mushroom trip.
Totally. All
Like
of it.
it's the same, you're dosing with the wrong medicine for the wrong time. And it doesn't mean you can never take that medicine. So we used to get people through the center for intake, and suffice it to say, we did no cognitive behavioral therapy.
Mhm.
So, I mean, we did some of it in skill building, but that was not what we were there for. And it
Sure.
wasn't what we did.
Yeah.
And so we would get people through sometimes, and in intake, it would become very clear to me they were not a fit for what we offered. And we offered a wide range of things,
But
but
not all the things. You can't offer everything.
no, no. And our aim was not towards that thing.
Right.
And there were people who came through that I would say to them, I'm going to send you somewhere else because this is where you will get what you need for now. And there may be a time you might be attracted to coming back. And if you are, come see us again. I
Totally.
mean, this is ethics within the thing, right?
Totally. Right, right, right. Well, it's also an ethics that requires you to kind of make mistakes for a little while as a practitioner, because at the beginning, you're sold a bill of lies.
Yeah.
That, like, if you have the
Yeah.
polyvagal training, if you have the attachment training, if you have like CBT and blah, 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 if you have a bunch of training, then you can help anyone. It's like,
Totally.
and that's what everyone gets told. I got told, everyone gets told this kind of lie, this bill of lies, which is, this is what you need to help anybody. And it's like, no, this is what you need to just like have the ABCs.
Totally.
It's like there's a level of understanding that gets masked because people are still inside capitalism.
Yeah.
If
Yes.
you're inside capitalism, your
Yeah.
healing work or your helping work, your care work is actually already twisted into a false reality because
Yeah.
you need it to survive. And that's like, you need to make money because you invest. It's like, okay, so if we took it out of capitalism back into like the real medicine world of people in a hunter-gatherer society that's specialized, but also it's very different. But if you take it out of capitalism, you go, I don't know how long it'll take you to be a professional. You see, it's like, I don't know how long it will take you to understand what the fuck I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you it's a 4-year program.
Yeah. Right.
And I also can't tell you with honesty that you'll be able to help every single person who comes to you. In fact, I'm probably going to tell you the opposite.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
going to tell you, oh, you're going to attract 95% ghosts the first like 10 years because you're too stupid to understand.
Right.
Now,
Right.
and now this is the thing is like what I'm trying to, sort of do, because I had to learn it the hard way, but even my hard way was only a few years. If you don't have this ability to keep breaking out of the identity you've boxed yourself in as,
Yes.
because the identity is really tight, because capitalism says, oh, you can't waste that degree. And it's like, what are you talking about? Waste it. There's no waste there. But the point is that the narrative structure is about like not making your parents sad about you, like there's all of this double bind threat-based domination paradigm inside of the structure. Well, if you fail this client, you really failed them. It's like, no. There was something in the relational field that you're intimate with where you're still dishonest with yourself as a
Yes.
practitioner.
Yes. Yes.
And until you understand that client is not your client,
Yes.
actually.
Yes.
You see, like you have to get out of the box to go,
Yes.
what's actually happening here is that I wasn't willing to look at the vast network of interdependence that was actually presenting itself, and because I needed the money to pay my rent.
Yes, totally.
You have to be able to take that level of cognition and go, oh, this is just another layer of the game I have to get better at playing.
Yeah.
But the problem we have is that so many people are in such high degrees of stress and pain and fear and not just the kind of things that happen to us, but how we act based on those things.
Totally.
Which is to say that in a DV situation, like a domestic violence situation, yes, you have the person who's being hit, but you also have the person who's being forced to hit.
Totally.
And most people are like, well, that person is a second priority. But in this way of thinking, that's
Totally.
one network.
Totally.
And it's all fucked up.
Because essentially what you're speaking about, I think, is that you have to come out of the boxes and look at the transactions.
Yeah.
And if you start looking at the transactions and the network of the transactions, it forms a bigger and more diverse picture of what's actually going on there. And then you actually have some agency within it. I mean, that's the crazy thing, is everybody's looking for the agency outside of that. But the agency is actually inside of that. It's in where the transactions are happening.
Yes. Yeah, totally. And it's funny too, because like, even in an anti-capitalist or non-capitalist frame, so I do a bunch of studying of like, what are the few remaining hunter-gatherer tribes now? Like, what are they actually doing socially? Because there actually are a few that are like, they actually know, because they see their neighboring tribes, when the neighboring tribes adopt agriculture, they see the shift from matrifocality to patrifocality, the fact that men become lazier and more violent and women become like slaves. They see that. It's like it's like if I just go visit like the next town over and I go, oh, this is weird. Like all of you are doing this, like, right. They are able to see that they're not living in a fucking bubble,
Because it's the rise of commodification is what
Yes, it's the rise of, because when you start doing that, you invent the ideas of private property and ownership, and then you invent the ideas of debt and credit.
Yeah.
And the minute you start to do that, agriculture, debt, credit, this is my land, not your land. These are my potatoes, not your potatoes.
You create false separation.
You create false separation, which then leads to a whole host of actually like violent behaviors.
Yeah.
Like as in like interpersonal violence, like shaming, ostracization, like kind of almost like institutionalized neglect, like where you actually like gaslight people, but it's like the culture. And it's like fucking creepy. So these hunter-gatherer tribes know that if you join that tribe over there, because they let people leave, it's like you can leave anytime. In the hunter-gatherer tribe, you can go away. That's the thing about being free, is that you don't have to fucking stay here.
Right.
But the problem is they actually can go, just look at how they're transacting and look at how we're transacting. So there's still transaction in a non-capitalist egalitarian system.
Totally.
It's not only capitalist transaction,
No.
but there's still a kind of call and response or give and take, or a kind of compromising, like anti-fragility you have to deal with.
Yeah, totally.
There's like people are kind of compromising, right? It's like grandma said, I can't do that. I really want to do that, but I love my grandma. And if I did that, it would cause a lot of problems. So I have to, like you have to, you find people wrestling with the same things everyone wrestles with.
Absolutely.
Which is, I want something, but I know that it will affect my people in this way that will be kind of, but I still want it. So how can I get, and sometimes you do have people lying, cheating, or doing something that they know if other people knew about it, they would get in trouble in that culture. But they do it anyway because they actually understand it's about the kind of knowing or the perception of the thing. It's not actually the thing. But here's where we get really interesting. It's like, in order to stay interdependent and keep the benefits you do have in the system you are in, right? It's because because this is still what's happening. It's you have to weigh the cost benefit of every
Totally.
action, no matter
Totally.
what, in
Yes.
your interdependent network.
Yes.
So in the egalitarian hunter-gatherer tribe, sometimes you do have to fucking make false or dualistic compromises because that's just how that's just how the cart is rolling down the hill.
Totally.
But what's very interesting, I think, about the West, or the fact that like in the West, we can sort of have a non-egalitarian, non-interdependent idea of the world, right? Like I'm not in a hunter-gatherer tribe on like a kind of material level, but I also am, because it doesn't really matter. But the point is that you have to do this double nervous system thing, like what you talked about.
Yeah.
There's the nervous system that goes, I am going to act this way, and I'm going to enjoy the benefit of not pissing off grandma.
Yeah.
Because
Totally.
the benefit of that is the benefit of that.
Totally.
But then there's this second nervous system that says, but I'm not going to allow it to actually change my perception of reality, because my perception of reality needs to be clear.
Well, that's the tricky part, I
That's
think.
the tricky part.
That's the tricky part.
That's the tricky part.
That's where you have to know where the move comes from.
That's right.
And I think this is what I teach a lot, is that most of the time, almost all of our moves are coming from the trauma body. They're coming
right.
from reaction, which means that they're coming from somewhere on that polarization of either control or collapse.
Right.
And if your moves are coming from control or collapse, you're actually not moving through your life.
That's
You're
right.
moving in reaction to life.
Right.
You're not moving your life.
Well, that's the moment when you're in like the Truman Show. You're in the simulation of your life that is actually not your life.
Exactly. But you believe that it's your life, right?
Oh, real. Exactly. That's right. Of course, you believe you're Truman. You're like, well, this is all I've ever known. Oh.
And even in the Truman Show, and even in Don't Worry, Darling. Did you see Don't Worry, Darling?
No. I don't think I did.
That's out recently.
Okay,
so even in both of those places, there's places where they wake up to the fact that they're in the simulation. And when they wake up to the fact that they're in the simulation, they have to find the move that is their move. And the only thing that really breaks the simulation is your move.
That's right.
And your move doesn't have to, this is what you're elucidating, is that your move doesn't have to look like the good move. No. It doesn't have to look like the move that's the best thing for your society. It has to be the true move. Yeah. Even if that true move makes a mess of things.
That's right.
It's that and ironically, of course, in like, if you look at constellation work, this is what, Hellinger and like any good constellator will talk to you about, is that like, the true move is the move that reorients the entire system to all of the true moves.
That's right.
Whether they adopt their true move in reaction to that or not.
That's right.
But you still know your move, even if you don't take it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
This is it. And the thing is like, this is both true in improv and in like physical theater or whatever. It's like, but it's not true all the time, because this is a very hot subject. Because there's the truths that you think are true.
Totally.
And those you might have to make if your eye is on the real prize.
Yes.
Because 100%. You're not really there yet. You're like, look, I don't really know what my true move is, but I know a move that's a little bit truer than this one, or it's at least a little bit different than the one I'm making.
Totally. 100%.
So you kind of iterate this kind of meta game, which is like a pre-game, which is like, until I'm able to really get to the true move, I have to make all of these like maybe moves.
Right. These practice moves or whatever they are. Right. And it's, in essence, they can clear the board for the other move.
That's the game. Yes.
And that's why it's a series of moves. It's not one move.
No. And it's a philosophy. It's a philosophy of moving.
Totally. It is a philosophy of moving. And I would say that there are those moments, which I know that you will affirm, where it is the move. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like there are some moments where like you're either walking through the door or you're not.
That's
And
it.
if you don't walk through the door, the game becomes something else.
That's right.
And if you do walk through the door, the game becomes something else. And
Yeah.
I have made those moves where I have walked and moves where I have not walked.
That's right.
And the moves where I have not walked and it was the true move, I have learned the hell realms
That's
that
right.
most people
Yeah.
never want to learn
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that
Totally.
door closes. That door
It's
closes. The door is not always open to you. And then you have to find or create another door.
that's the whole philosophy of moving, which is this philosophy of like, I used to tell this story to the people who come to me for trauma. And I think it's still a good story, but I'm telling it now in this different way. But it's like, look, we're going to climb up, we're going to hike, we're going to go on a hike. And we're going to go on a hike and there's wilderness. We're going to hike in the wilderness. Okay. So now I'm prepping you. Okay. So we have to have the right shoes, the right clothes. We have to have a backpack. We got to make sure we can light a fire. We got to make sure we have a sleep, okay. So you have to have all this preparation if you're going to hike in the wilderness, right? Okay. So some people already get that. They go, okay, so okay. But it's like, no, you don't quite understand, because this is still only the preamble, is that we need all the stuff. But you also need to be able to, now that we have all the stuff and we know how to read the compass and we know how to maybe like the bare minimum of like not falling off a fucking cliff in the dark, okay, because there's like, you take it slow. Then there's the building up strength. Okay, so we're going to hike, but your legs are fucking weak. So now that we have all the stuff, we need to like have this periodization of like, you hike and you rest and you hike and you rest until you can really hike, because actually what you think is hiking right now isn't hiking.
Not hiking.
But that's
Right.
okay. It's okay. It's just, okay, now we come the second phase, which is like, you have to get smarter, more skillful, stronger, more resilient in this capacity of the hike, which is to know when to light the fire, know when to take a nap, know when to do all these things. Right? Because maybe you thought you were going to hike 15 miles, but actually you only need to hike 1 mile today. And it's
Mhm.
like, how do you figure that out? It's like, that's the game. It's like, you need to figure it out. So all of this preamble, and people go, okay, this is going to take a lot longer than I thought, because I thought we were hiking to the summit. I'm like, okay, so now I have to help you, because we have to first get you to the summit. We have to first get you to the summit. Like, how are you going to get there? Like, so I have to be, okay. And now let's say we do get there. You're not going to be the same person you are.
Totally.
Okay, so now so let's just say we could fast forward to the summit. You're going to be a different person. I need to give you a different preamble, which
Yeah.
is, so you thought we were going to the summit, and technically we are, but along the way we found a cave. Along the way to the summit, we found a cave. And something in you really wanted to go into that cave. And the friendly neighborhood guide was like, you hired me to take you to the summit, wink, wink. You hired me to take you to the summit, wink, wink. Don't you remember, wink, wink? Because you totally want to still go to the summit, right? And I'm just your friendly neighborhood guide who's going to take you there, right? And you have to start to realize we've now entered something else.
Yeah.
Which is, something inside you really wants to go into that cave. I'm your friendly neighborhood guide, and I say, this is why you really hired me, right? I have to get your acknowledgement of the fact that actually you hired me to get you to the mouth of a cave. And then they go, you're right, I need help. And I go, yeah. And I'm like, right, exactly. Like, you have to admit something about the real transaction here, which is that
Totally.
you hired me to get you to a cave you didn't know existed, because you thought you wanted to go to a summit. And I was like, okay, sure, you want to go to the summit. Yeah, I hear this story all the time. That's why my company is called Summits Are Us, like, we get you to the summit, guaranteed, wink, wink. It's like, and because people are like, oh, that's what I want to get to the summit. It's like, sure you do, but there's a cave over here now. Oh, okay. But then I go, okay, so now here's the second preamble, which is, we're just going to set up camp outside this cave. We're just going to set up camp outside this cave for a while. like as in like maybe like 3 years or something, or maybe it's 2 weeks or whatever. But I'm just saying, we're going to set up camp at the mouth of the cave because I need you to sit like 1 inch into the threshold of that cave and not go in and just fucking sit there all day and all night for at least one. And you're not going to be able to do it. You're going to go 10 minutes, I'm done. And I'm going to go, great. I told you until you can sit there for 24 hours, not blacking out, we're not going to go into the cave.
Mhm.
And you're like, no, 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 we should just go in. It's like, no, 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 I'm not going to go in with you. This is what I said. You can take it or leave it. And then they start to go, well, I hired you. It's like, no, you didn't. You didn't hire my ethics. You can't, you know, like you didn't, you're not, I'm not like your fucking slave. I'm saying this is the game that we're actually playing now. You're not in as control as you thought you were, but I can't make you do it. You can leave. You can find another summit guide because there's a million summit guides and they will take you to the summit. But the point is, what happens when you sit at the threshold of the cave you didn't know you wanted to go into until yesterday? Right? Consciously, you were like, I didn't think I wanted this, but something really wants this. And now I'm being told I can't have it. And I'm saying, yeah, you could maybe have it, but you got to sit at the threshold for a while. Because what people don't understand is that exactly what's happening there is what you were just talking about, is that there will only be one moment when you cross that threshold.
Totally.
Because you could come in, we could say you could go in the cave, you could come out, you could go in, you could come out. And people do that, right? They just go in and out and in and out, and they like have their fucking tea and crumpets, and they think that they went into the cave.
Yes.
They think they went into the cave because they were just like, it's okay, I can do whatever.
Yes.
But I'm saying, no, no, no. If you don't understand what I'm pointing to, you will never be able to go into that cave again.
That's right. That's right.
Because it's like, there's one shot at this.
That's right.
There's one shot at this. But if you fuck it up, you'll just get another shot at a different cave another time. It's fine.
Totally.
It's totally fine. You know, so it's like you let the steam out of the pressure cooker a little bit, but you also say it's still hot. The pressure cooker is still hot.
Yes.
It's maybe not going to explode in your face, but you shouldn't touch it. It's going to burn you. Because what you have to understand is that you think it's a material thing that you could just cross the threshold and stay the same.
Yes.
You think that you could just go in and the gravity is going to be the exact same as it is when you're not in.
Yes.
So, okay, out here is where we have the backpack and the camp stove and the fucking hiking boots, and you can like put on a scarf and all this shit. And you could have consent about harm reduction because you're outside of the cave and we have this whole agreement about shared reality and shit, right? Okay. But the point, what I'm trying to say is, if you really go into that cave, I mean, really go into that cave, you will not have a fucking scarf. You will not have a fucking hiking boot.
Right.
You will barely have the memory that you can get out of it.
That's right.
You might not even remember that I'm out here with the campfire.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
You see? And it's like, so this is the real game now, which is to say, there is another world that I can't really go with you.
Yes.
But I could stay outside this cave and watch you. I could call in, I could send messenger pigeons into the cave. And I can go, remember, you could always come out. I'm here outside. There's a warm fire. And I just want you to know that it's okay.
Yeah.
Like I can say that from the mouth of the cave, but whether or not you hear me when you're inside the cave I don't have any control over that.
Totally. And how about the fact that once you're in the cave, it's not exactly one room.
It's not it's not what you think it is, because if you really enter that cave, it is a different reality.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. And I think, so much like as you're describing and I feel it in my body, like I really appreciate the telling it in the way that you're telling it, because it's rare that I speak to somebody where that resonance, where I can feel it in my being. And that feels so good to have that experience. But I think too, there's the piece around people linger at the mouth of that cave for lifetimes,
For lifetimes.
for lifetimes.
That's right.
And they think that they're doing the thing.
Uh-huh.
Because these people tend to find me. They
Oh, yeah,
tend to
totally.
find me and be like, they don't tell me I'm lingering at the threshold, but in 5 minutes, I know they're lingering at the
Yeah,
threshold.
totally. 100%. I get you. Yeah, yeah.
And I think the thing is that, like, I've wondered for a long time, like, what is it in the alchemy of some of us that makes us cross that threshold, even if we didn't knowingly consent to crossing the threshold?
Totally.
Because once you cross the threshold, like, it's like my friend Sadie says, once you cross it, you smell different.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
there's no going back once you've crossed the
Right.
threshold. And there's
Technically,
rooms within that space
yeah,
that are very hard to get back from.
totally.
People
And
don't
technically,
tell you.
no one tells you. And technically, if you really go into the cave, you never actually leave it.
You don't
Yeah,
dare.
you
You
don't
don't.
actually leave the
You
cave.
don't. You just learn how to participate in the other reality from
Yes.
a framework and a vantage point that looks more like it might be in coherence with the reality, but you smell so different and you
Yeah.
vibrate so differently that anybody who isn't near the reality that you are in walks in the other direction,
Totally.
because they can't tolerate that, whatever that is now emanating from you.
Right. Because because here's the thing, spoiler alert, if you actually go on this journey, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't yet, you still don't know what I'm talking about.
That's right. That's it.
But the point, what I'm trying to say is, spoiler alert, no one comes out of that cave because the cave eats you.
Yes,
You
exactly.
actually die in that
You
cave,
die in that
but
cave.
something else arises that is
It
still
animates you. Yes.
It has all your fucking memories. It has all your fucking tendencies, and it has all your fucking like ticks, and is all your, it has, it's like a perfect simulation of you, except one thing is different. And that's the thing that makes a difference.
Yes.
Is that now you understand something about the nature of reality and how much you were not actually in it before
Yes.
you
Yes.
died in the
Yes.
cave. Before the cave ate you, you were
Yes.
actually some kind of weird ghost thing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
now after you got eaten by the cave, you're still a ghost thing, but not only.
Yes. Yes.
Because
Yeah.
you can immediately reference all of that ghostliness. You can go, oh yeah, I remember what it was used to be like.
Yes.
Completely 100%. I remember what it used to be like to act in a certain way, to
Yes.
believe certain things, to have certain double binds that were seamed permanently in my system forever and ever. Like, you completely, it's not like you lose it.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
not like you forget it. You actually just get more of it. But it's not the same qualia.
Yeah.
It's not the same qualia, because you can go, oh, right, that's what got me to the cave.
Yes. Totally.
So it's actually a gift, but it's a shitty gift. I mean, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah. Totally.
Because doing it while you're in the cave, it shows up as how nasty it really is.
That's right. Exactly.
Because when you're in the cave and you actually have been eaten and you've decided to be eaten, you've actually gone, take me away, like, fucking do it. Do the damn thing. I've been waiting for this for 10 million lifetimes. Just fucking do it.
Totally.
Once you actually say that and it go through the process, when you pick up the old habit or the old addiction, it's not the same pleasure cycle.
Totally.
You don't get the same like hit of like, you go, what? It's like the cigarette tastes bad in your mouth.
Totally.
It's like that feeling isn't like it's not like a metaphor. It's
Right.
literally like, it's not the same substance.
And it's empty. It's empty. It's empty of body for you, because your body is no longer in that cycle or in that qualitative exchange anymore.
Well, it's literally a different reality. You're in a different gravity.
Yes. Yes.
It's like, if I go to the moon, I have to rethink all sorts of things, because the moon is different than the earth.
Yes.
Am I different? Well, that's where you get into interdependence, because me here on earth is not me on the moon.
Yes.
So I have to think and I have to rewire my whole neural network to make different choices because the gravity is different, the atmosphere is different, blah, blah, blah. What people don't understand is that you don't need to go to the moon or go to ayahuasca to do this. You don't
Yes.
need to go to Peru. That's a nice thing. And I've done it and it was very wonderful. But the point I'm saying is that like everyone's got their cave.
Yeah,
Oh,
totally.
I think a lot of people are actually avoiding their cave by
Yes.
going to do the ayahuasca
Yes,
or
me
this other
too.
thing.
Me too. And I would say that I know people for which that cave has shown up in many moments.
Oh, totally.
And they are purposefully saying no to those
Oh,
moments
yeah.
because it can't not show up for them because the divine is always showing up for you.
Right. Yeah.
It's
Right.
always available to a certain degree.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And that's the thing that people go, it's like, I told this story as if there was only one cave.
Right.
But the point is there's only one cave for each of us, but it
Yeah.
shows up as everything.
Yes, totally.
It
Totally.
shows up as my thought in the morning when I wake up. It shows up as my capacity to deal with the irritation of my life. It shows up as my relationships. It shows up as my fear, my pain, my hunger. The point is this cave or this door that I'm talking about is reality itself.
Yes.
But you're fundamentally changing how you relate to reality by going, I'm going to really fucking be here.
Yes.
I'm not going to be in my Truman Show simulation anymore.
Yeah.
I'm going to step out of the door. So in the Truman Show, Truman's cave was at like the end of the movie where he left the fucking dome.
Yes.
But the whole movie was his preparation to sit at the threshold of that cave, that moment, because the whole movie was basically his consciousness sitting at that door saying, am I going to open and walk through?
100%. I mean, that was like the post I wrote this morning about state change. Like when we make big changes, we wrestle with them, we contemplate them, we turn them around in our mind, we discuss them with people, we hire people to help us.
Totally.
But the reality is when you step through the door of that cave, when it really happens, it's because every one of your bodies is cooperating and aligning for that moment, that millisecond, for that to happen. And it is outside of you that cooperation happens. You don't orchestrate that thing. You might orchestrate the preparation for that.
That's what you do. The conditions, maybe some of the conditions. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it still may not happen for you ever. I remember the first time I went on a meditation retreat and I had this like crazy Jonic experience. And I came back and I told my girlfriend who had been sitting in this tradition for a long time. And I was like, oh, I mean, everybody's having that. She's like, Bree, everybody is not having that happen. I said, well, what else are they doing? And she's like, they're thinking about food and sex.
Yeah.
And I was like, but and she was like, Bree, trust me, this is not happening. And I was like, really? And she was like, no. And so then I kept going and, you know, whatever happened, happened. But it took me a long time to recognize the fact that much of our life is spent preparing for that moment in the cave.
That's
yeah.
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 And it's like, you know, it goes beyond right and wrong, good and bad. Like, should you do it or shouldn't you? It's like, those are not correct.
No,
those
it's
not useful.
Being compelled there.
Yeah.
There's a compelling going on there that is so much deeper than those things.
Right. Yeah. And this compelling is like the real transaction, which is it's not competitive because on some level, you're just discovering like, it's not even yours, but it is your experience. You're discovering your real experience.
Yes.
Like the experience that's like also encompasses all of the false experiences that you protect yourself with.
Yes.
It's like you get the real thing, but you also get all of the fake things because you're like, oh, right, because I choose those fake things for this reason and that reason and the other thing. But at a certain point, there's like this peeling off of all the Band-Aids. Yeah. Because the wound that you think is a wound, right? The harm that you think that you've really happened to you, the pain, and it's like very real, like the blistering hot sun of the pain that you've experienced or that you don't want to fucking think about. At a certain point, you actually just like feel the light of it.
Yeah.
You feel the warmth, the light, and it sort of like disintegrates your ass. You know, it starts to disintegrate you as a kind of entity that is separate from it, right? Because
Yeah.
there's me and there's my trauma, right? It's like I can heal myself if I get rid of my trauma. It's like, no, that's actually not how it works.
Yeah.
And this is the fucked up thing that I keep coming back to about, like, you know, it's not just the narrative about trauma healing on a personal, social level. It's the narrative about trauma healing on an institutional, cultural level.
100%.
These fucking narratives are actually the same. They just show up slightly differently, but they're
Yeah.
both about fundamentally continuing the lie, the dishonesty of separation.
Yes, 100%. Yes. 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 And fundamentally, that lie undergirds every move that's being made, every transaction that's happening in all of those systems. It's the entire base of how those systems are built,
Right.
which is why I've been arguing for so long that there's no way those systems can liberate a fucking person.
No.
They're not,
Or a culture, or like whatever
or a community.
they're trying to say that they're doing.
That's right. 100%. It's all a lie.
Right.
Yep.
And this is what's funny to me about, like, the work that you and I are doing, and you're doing it more because you're actually more involved in the sort of nonprofit, whatever you want to call it, nonprofit, industrial, corporate health industry, whatever the fuck, I don't know, like wellness, blah, blah, blah. I'm more of this like rogue outsider doing my stand-up routine on the internet, you know, like whatever. But the point is that, like, that world of social justice is not just.
That's right.
Because justice is really this liberation we're talking about, which actually brings you back to solidarity with reality. Like,
Yes.
it doesn't separate you more.
That's right.
It actually brings you back like a boomerang. It's
Yeah,
like
it doesn't give
boomerangs you
doesn't
back.
give you a new, better reality to embrace.
Yeah.
No, no, I know. I know. I mean, this is the shit that like really keeps me on the edge of whether or not I will continue doing this or not.
Totally.
Because it is it's essence depleting.
Totally.
Just being in relationship with those large organizational bodies that are fixated on it being a particular way to protect some ephemeral thing that we've all agreed upon must be protected for us to stay safe is just a giant, colossal lie. And then there's so much harm coming from that.
Right.
And it's
Like,
the harm that really keeps me staying somewhere on that edge instead of selling beauty products, which I think would
totally.
actually be way more pleasurable for me.
Yeah, totally. Like, sell interior decorating or something.
Seriously.
Totally.
Legit.
Like,
I mean,
no,
I remember in my 4th year of owning the center, I owned it for 11 years. In the 4th year, this is a bad sign. I was driving to work and passing the tiny mall in Vermont, and there was a Kohl's. I don't even like Kohl's. I grew up in Bloomingdale's, okay? I'm driving to the center and I see a Kohl's and I think, I wonder if they're hiring. That is a bad sign right there.
Yeah. Well, that's the door. That's your cave going, do you really want to go in the cave? Because the center is just the vehicle we're using to get you to look at the fucking cave, right? Like, there's a reality there that is so precious and comical at the same time, right? It's just comical. It's like, right, why would I want to work at Kohl's? It's like, right, because there's something like there's something more real about that on some.
Yes. Well, and there's something promising about that.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
what it was, is that the idea of being a cashier at Kohl's felt more promising than the 10,000 patients we had. And I was arguing with Blue Cross Blue Shield to try and get them to pay for body-based work. So instead I had to create a fucking nonprofit arm because the poor people couldn't pay for the somatic therapy that they needed for the trauma. And all they would pay for was the goddamn psychiatrist, which I needed them to have sessions with so I could pay my employees.
I mean, so
I could write a whole book on
no, I mean, this is it's a fucking Shakespearean comic tragedy.
It is.
It's totally based on this oligarchical nepotism in which, like, there's 10,000 lords and ladies, but they're all trying to kill each other. And the peasants are just like watching these people
Yes.
fucking do their soap opera, but also being oppressed by them. And so then the peasants go, well, let's make a play in which everything is a metaphor for what's actually happening for
Yes.
real.
Yes.
And we go, oh, this is satire. It's like, yeah, but it's actually more honest.
Yes.
It's
Exactly.
more honest than what's happening because all these fucking like billionaire oligarchs are actually like in their fucking vampire angel simulations.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
and I and I was really feeling and thinking about this the other day because I'm reading a few books of people who are looking at this from different angles, like the kind of labor union angle and different things. But I was trying to think of like, what is it about these nonprofit NGO like status quo, but they say they're not the status quo, but they really are the status quo because the status quo is separation and curing and just like what we've just talked about. And I thought into the idea or the character of these entities, because they're really entities now. They're corporate entities that sort of like have a mind of their own. And it's really creepy when you start to really look at what's happening in like law and legal stuff. It's a very weird shit. But what I was like, in like a fantasy novel, this is totally like a mixture of like the vampire archetype and the angelic archetype combined in some fucked up mutation.
Mm,
Where like the vampire is constantly hungry and but needs slaves because if it eats the blood supply, it goes hungry. So it needs kind of like chattel. It needs kind of like this creepy slave, like keep the slave alive so that they produce blood so that you can stay alive, but also like, what the fuck? So it's like that model, but the vampire also thinks it's a good person.
totally.
And then it's an angel because it's trying to protect the god.
Totally.
So it's like a
Totally.
vampire angel. And it's
It's true.
like, oh, this is the whole fucking game is basically
True.
vampire angels who are like sucking on the blood of a child while
Yeah.
they're talking about social justice. It's
100%.
like, oh, this is actually the game. We're actually like my stupid little story, my fantasy novel in my head, flash fiction about vampire angels is more honest
Yeah. Totally.
than what we're talking about when we go to conferences about social
Yeah.
justice.
I
Like
know.
it's more fucking honest.
I know.
My satire that I thought of or came through me is way more fucking real
I
than
know.
the story that we're hearing on Instagram
I
and in
know.
your fucking like lottie dottie conferences. Like, because who's paying those fucking speakers to go to the university
I
so that
know.
they can buy houses on stolen land?
I
This
know.
is the fucking game.
I know, I know, I know, I know, I know. And so I repeatedly ask myself this question or like am checking myself for how much capacity I have to interact with that level of dishonesty without it impeding my ability to exist.
That's right.
And I think that is unfortunately where like that it's this dance for me that
Totally.
happens. And yesterday put me over that threshold a little bit, which is why I was just irate last night and into this morning.
Right.
And I think it's yeah, I don't know. I mean, it goes back sometimes to that feeling of like, where's my move?
That's
And
right. Yeah,
outside of all of these conditions, still, what is my move?
totally.
So last week I'm in New York with my mom. We're
Yeah.
walking back to this hotel we're staying at, and we walk by this woman on the ground who is homeless, which of course New York has tons of homeless people.
Mhm.
And she's sitting on the ground and she is wrapped in this white sheet. And she is huddled over, holding this cup with a few pennies in it. And her whole being is shaking and her head is down. And I'm like, immediately, you can't not be struck by the absolute direness of this particular condition.
Totally.
And so I reach in my purse to get some money and I grab some money and I walk over to her and I lean down and she lifts her head and I make eye contact with her and I say a few things and I give her the money and I walk back over to my mom and my mom says, that's not enough. And I said, Mom, if we give her more money, I'm worried she's going to get stolen from. Like she's pretty helpless.
That's right.
So my mom says to me, it doesn't matter what happens to this money. You give it to her anyway. So my mom hands me some money. I walk back over. I lean down. I make eye contact with her again. I say a few things. I give her the money. There's a security guard standing there. And my mom looks at him and she says to him, can we do something? Can we call the police? And he looks at her and he's like, oh no, there's nothing you can do. He said, God bless you. You just did the one thing that you could do. And I look at him and I say to him, you're going to keep an eye on her. And he said, oh no, that's not my job. I have a job to do, blah, 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 blah. All right. So we walk away, we walk into this hotel and I can't let it go. I'm so upset. I can't let it go. And I feel my own helplessness is so strong. And I know I am not helpless.
That's right.
And so I say to my mom, I'm walking out, I'm going back on the street and I'm going to buy this woman a scarf. I don't know what else to do. I don't live in New York. I don't know who to call, but this is what I can do. And so my mom says, you're going back out? I said, yes, I'll be back. So she says, okay, don't take too long. So she still thinks I'm in danger at Times Square. So I go out there and I walk to the corner and now there's a Weed World truck. If this is not the most farcical story you've ever heard, now there is a Weed World truck on this corner. And as I'm approaching, I see the truck and I'm like, oh, fuck, I know they've got to have moved this woman. And so I walk over and sure enough, she's gone. Somebody must have like scampered her away. So I look in a couple of the other streets, I can't find her. So I don't know what to do from there, you know? So I go back and I think, well, I still made my move. Like I still walked out there to go do the thing, even if the result was not available to me. I still went there to do the thing that I could do. So I go back into the hotel room. I can't shake it. And so I say to my mom, I'm going downstairs to go get a cup of coffee at the bar. I can't stay in the room. Like I can't, I feel claustrophobic.
You gotta like move around.
I gotta move, right? I gotta move. So I go down to the bar. I sit down at the bar. The waitress comes over. I said, can I get a cup of coffee? Oh, we've closed everything for the.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Here we go.
I'm like, what the fuck? So I go back to the hotel room. Now I got to get in the shower, right? So I get in the shower and like, that's it. I'm able to like calm it enough for the night. There's more that happens the next day. 3 more moves that all get hijacked the next day. We don't get on our plane. The flight is canceled. It gets, I mean, on and on, Dare. It was 48 hours of this magical shit happening for me, right? That was essentially testing my moves.
Totally.
It was really a function of not the result of my moves, but the test of my ability to say, I'm not going to be hampered in making that move, even if I don't ever see the result.
Ooh, and it's so hard too, because most people are like, oh, it's so sad that you missed your flight.
Yeah, I know. Right, exactly.
But to the practitioner, this was not about the. It's not about
never
any
about
of
the
that.
flight.
It's not about any of that.
And the deck was stacked because Sydney is submitting her application for college this week, and she was working on her essay, and she was crying to me the night before about how she needed me to be home, and this wasn't the week for me to not be home. And I had spelled out for her exactly how we were going to walk through it when I got back, and then I had to text her at school and say, I'm not going to make it home today.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I had to trust that that was the move, that the invisible move I couldn't see, that I had made all of my moves, and that now I had to trust the wider network of movement, that it was carrying my daughter and I and my mother wherever the fuck we were going, and that homeless woman on the street too.
Right. Because at a certain point, your moves are only reflections of this sort of philosophy of movement that is movement itself.
100%.
It's like we're all in the move of the god or the goddess or the Tao or whatever you want to call it. It's like, but the universe is moving.
Yes.
And inside that moving, we are making our moves.
Yes.
And
Yes.
at a certain point, you get to see that, or you feel it, or you know it on a level where you kind of, it breaks your idea of yourself as a
Yes.
kind of independent free will agent, because you're
Yes.
not it's like at a certain level, you can pretend to be an
Totally.
independent free will agent. Like, yeah,
Totally.
totally. I can right now get out of my house, do a little dance on the lawn, and no one will stop me. And I'm like, look at me, my free will.
Totally.
But
Totally.
and that's like, a superficial level of the game. But the stuff we're talking about is once you're in the cave and you realize you never left and you can't ever leave. And
Yes.
actually, like, even when you were not in it, you were in it, because the cave is everywhere. You're like,
Yes.
oh, it's like throughout time and space. And you're like, oh shit, there was no past where I wasn't in the cave. Like Truman in the Truman Show, everything, his entire life to get through that one threshold was still part of the world.
Yes. Exactly.
He just didn't know it because it was
Yes.
a world inside of a world.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So it's not like the simulated world he was in was the fake world, because it was still part of the world.
100%.
So we think about the things that shouldn't have happened to us, the things that
Yeah.
we hate about history and reality and the vampire angels, and we go, yeah, this fucking is a terrifying game of hypnosis, but also they're still part of this larger move.
Yes.
And it's like, this
100%.
is the thing I think so many people get to a suicidal point about,
Yes.
because they can't see that life isn't a binary.
Yes.
Like, yes, there are vampire angels, and there are also the things that allow vampire angels to exist.
Yes. 100%.
And it's like, that means anything can exist, including vampire angels, and you have to be happy about that.
Yes. Yes.
And then we go, no, I don't like Donald Trump. Donald
Right.
Trump shouldn't exist, and he shouldn't have been president. And I'm like,
Right.
but that clearly wasn't the move.
Right. That clearly wasn't the move. And there was a collective that created that move. Actually, there was a collective that was orchestrated to create that move.
Totally,
More
because
accurate.
there are these conditions inside of conditions, and at some level, there's lobbyists and social media influencers and all sorts of people who are trying to move the field from their illusory vantage point.
Yes.
They're saying separation is real, good and evil is real, rich and poor is the way it is, and they're
Yeah.
moving in this direction. But at a certain level, you also understand that there's another door outside of that one. And
Yes.
you go, oh, I can just keep. And this is like the non-dual thing, which is like, at a certain point, you have to both be this like weird hermit in the mountains
Yes.
and in New York City.
Yeah, totally.
You're
100%.
like both, you're like a both and. You're like, yes,
You can't make a move that is of your own agency, right? You can't make them, which is really just you deciding that your moves are going to be as fused with the true move as you can get, as close to that as you can get, which is what the death practice is all about, right?
totally.
Is like you're getting to as close to that true move as you can, because it feels the most authentic or the most true or the most honest, which is the word that comes the closest for me.
Sure, accurate,
And
honest, for sure. Yeah, you're just like, oh, this is more honest.
and so you can't go against that wide body that has decided together of influencers, lobbyists, everything that you just said, that it's decided the game is this, unless you are connected to the true move, because you'll die trying to do it, because they will eat you alive, because it
Totally.
is that big.
Yeah.
And so the only thing that can support you being able to infiltrate that, if that's the word for what it is that you have the honesty in your back pocket, essentially.
Totally. I remember, it's like you're like a zombie princess. It's like, Game of Thrones was a stupid show, but it had some good metaphors, like, and spoiler alert if people haven't like watched it, but the point is like
I haven't watched it.
there was this point where there was a character called like the leader of the sparrows, and he like was very poor monk kind of priest person who like dressed in rags and like, but he had this like faction of zealots, but the point is like he was directly against the queen, who was like basically a vampire zombie bitch, like she just was She always got her way by hook or by crook, did the most despicable things, and she was totally okay with it, right? She's just a total asshole. She's the zombie vampire princess angel, right? Like she gets her way by hook or by crook. She kills whoever she has to. She's the most disturbed, and she's just doing her thing. And then there's this guy, there's this sparrow who sees that there's a potential to shift the game by doing like the same kind of thing, but almost like in the opposite appearance.
Mm,
It's like, don't hide from the people, don't have any riches, just be so fucking honest that everyone likes you, right?
yeah.
But if you zoom out from that, both of them were still the same character.
Yes, 100%. Yes, exactly.
So we've got
Yes.
these like zombies that'll eat you, these princess zombies who can never have enough food, they're hungry ghosts forever. And then you have these people who take the so-called opposite road, more honesty, more poverty, more like renunciation, and yet still play the same game and don't even know it.
That's it. That's it. That's it. And until
It's
you
so
exit the
mind-blowing.
game, I know. And until you exit the game, you just don't know the difference.
Nope.
You can say you know the difference, but you just don't know the difference
That's
because
right.
it's fundamentally different.
That's right. And
Yes.
both of those characters are using codependency and domination in different
Yes.
ways to get you to be a little slave puppet.
Yeah. 100% true.
But one of them looks like they're being a good person, and one of them is like obviously an asshole, right? Like
That's
the
right.
zombie in this model, the zombie queen is totally, everyone knows she's psychotic. You know, it's
Right.
like, no, there's no fucking, and in some way, she's more honest.
Well, I was going to say, in some ways, it's better to be in that space. I mean, this is like when somebody comes to me and they, like, have been through the typical treatment arc of eating disorders, right?
Yeah.
They have basically traded in their eating disorder for like yoga,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Or art, right? And then they come to me and they have an entire ecosystem that is built upon how good they are because now they don't restrict anymore. But what they do is they're really good at yoga. And in fact, they're really good at like the competitive form of yoga. And they look really good and they're a vegan and blah, blah, blah. And they'll tell me this for 20 fucking sessions.
Yeah, totally.
Where right. But the reality is that fundamentally nothing has changed. Now you see that person at 25 and that's what they're doing. You see that same person at 60 and they're begging you for help. At 60, they're sitting there and they're saying, what the fuck is going on? I've been on this train for 45 years and I've done the yoga and I've done the spiritual practice and I've done the eating disorder, and somehow I just have this sense something's still not right. And I think maybe you might tell me what's not right. And then you start talking to them and it's like gold. They're like lapping it up like it's their last fucking, cup of tea. Because the reality is everybody else has been selling them the bill of goods all of that time and telling them that if they just do this other good thing, they're going to get to the summit that you described. And I'm telling them, dude, the summit isn't actually the destination. And they've been lying to you all this time. And at 65, somebody is finally willing. They have the humility at that time to basically say, thank you, Jesus, for telling me the truth.
Totally.
I still don't know how I'm going to get out of it, but thank God for you that you're telling me the truth, because I knew somewhere in my being that all those other people were fucking lying to me.
Totally. Everyone knows this, but then it's like what we're fighting against is this sort of egotistic and even if it's a woman, they're testosterone essentially.
Totally.
Fighting against this ability to be so stubbornly greedy.
Dogged. Yes.
Doggedly greedy about like the life they're supposed to have.
Yes.
That it takes from 25 to 65 for life to basically grind you
Break
into
them down.
paste.
Totally.
And that's also love, because again, like what I said at the beginning, it's like your dumbass is the problem.
Yes.
Like our dumbass is the problem. It's like, I need to be ground into a pulp before I come and become honest, because there's something I'm resisting about honesty or intimacy that is not the real thing.
Yes.
But I believe it is, and so I'm going to resist
And
until.
I want to keep believing that it is because I like the idea of believing that it is, and everybody else is believing the idea that it
Yeah,
is.
we all believe together, and we're in a loose cult that we don't call a cult.
Totally.
You know, and
Totally.
that's the thing too, because like at a certain point, the thing that I also find it's hard is that like when people come to people like us and they have a lot of, let's just call it trauma, but they have a lot of delusions that are based in pain-based delusions, is that they actually don't know how to trust information correctly.
Yes.
Like they don't know how to basically, like what you said, reality test is a great word, is they
Yeah.
don't know how to like take in information without it having an either be like, either I submit and believe this information, or
Yes.
I completely 100% resist it as a lie.
Yes.
Those two paths are the same path.
That's right. Exactly. They're the same arm that
The
they come
same.
from.
Yeah,
That's
it's
right.
like you can either accept it and become a slave because that's what belief and faith and like listening is. It's like, no, that's not it. But also this like, no, you just lied to me and you're trying to hurt me. And I know that because blah, blah, blah. And it's like both of those options are not anything involving discernment
That's
whatsoever.
right. That's right. Or agency.
There's
Even though
nothing in
you
there.
think you have so much in there. That's right. I
And
know.
so a lot of times is like, we have to teach people how to basically become like an informational or like a communication scientist or something.
Yes.
It's like I take in communication, but then I sort of like put it on the table and I
Yes.
kind of like look at it through different like magnifying glass. I become like this weird Frankenstein doctor of communication and
Yes.
information,
Yes.
because most people who are coming to this, they actually don't like the voices that are already in their head are unreliable narrators.
That's right. That's right. That's
So
right.
they need to develop a reliable narrator who is kind of like a detective or a
That's right.
scientist who is kind of like, just the facts, ma'am.
That's
Like
right.
you need to have like a fucking like, what's that word? Like Columbo in your head,
Yes.
who's
Yes.
like not willing to be tricked by the criminals,
That's
right?
right. That's
Like you
right.
have to develop this kind of personality that is like, I won't be fooled.
That's right. That's right.
Like
Yeah.
that's like a detective, like
That's
some
right.
kind of like gritty asshole who's like going to like question authority,
That's right.
but
And
also is going to question the stupid voices in your head all the time.
that's right. And a sensibility for what the truth feels like and smells like.
Yeah, and you have to develop that. It's not obvious at the
That's
beginning.
right.
It's
That's
like
right.
you can't just imagine a smell.
That's right.
Like people, it's also like you can't just imagine what sex is like if you're a virgin. You
That's
don't
right.
know what the fuck you're talking about. It's
That's right.
just an imagination.
Yeah,
And
it's
that's
true.
the imagination might get you to the threshold. Again, what we're
Yes.
talking about, imagination might prepare you to get to a doorway,
That's right.
but getting through the doorway is another reality that is not your imagination.
That's right. That's right. Which leads us to a whole other subtopic, which we should talk about another time because my handyman is about to be here.
Totally.
To get the mold off of my ceiling. But the subtopic that leads me into, which I would love to talk to you about, is this piece around like how you can be oriented towards that. And that's what we're really talking about, is that like people think we're going to give them the thing, but what we're actually doing is orienting them to the landscape so that they can understand how to navigate that terrain because they're already in it. They just don't recognize it.
100%.
Yes, and there
100%.
are both tools and orientation maps that can help you to understand that so that you can find your footing within it and you can walk more easily. And
Totally.
to me, this is the whole thing.
Right, because it's this what you're talking about, this subtopic is still part of the philosophy of moving. It's
Yes.
a philosophy of moving. It's like you get these high and flighty ideas, but then at a certain point you need to know how to read a compass and like
Yes.
you need to know how to like identify markers in the
Yes.
landscape. Like
Yes, you
just
have
need
to operationalize the whole thing. I mean,
totally.
this is where my whole like thing of like creating this different healthcare system came in. Is it's like, oh, that all sounds amazing, but how the fuck do you operationalize
That's
something
it.
like that? And that is where the rubber really meets the road,
Totally.
is
I'm
how do
down.
you operationalize all these things in real time when you wake up in the morning and you have to feed yourself and take care of your kid and pay the bills in a capitalist society and
Totally.
all of these things, which is why I think it's lovely. And at some point, I may take a very long meta break where I go to Bali and like,
Yeah,
drop out for a little while so that I can refuel on like beautiful landscape and the beach and cheap food
yeah,
and spiritual people. But at the end of the day, I'm still going to leave that cave too and re-enter this landscape where my living is happening in this lifetime.
that's
There
right.
may be another lifetime I have that is monastic.
Yeah,
I've had
totally.
plenty of them. Maybe
Yeah,
I'll
yeah, yeah.
have another one on a different planet.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
I won't have to come back again. I don't know. But I know that in this one, at this particular time, this is where we belong.
Totally. Right. Yeah, no, this is it. I mean, I think we should stop there because it's been wonderful already. And I think yeah, we'll talk more because
Fun.
this is where it's through the operationalization is like, it's like you need to give people a better way of doing what they're already doing so that they can
Yes.
make the new choices that are
Yes.
actually more of the true moves.
Yes.
Like you need to show
Exactly.
people that there's the capacity in any situation to make a true move is
Yes.
only as good as your ability to sort of like operationalize the landscape of movement that's possible.
Yes, yes, and to feel the move, to recognize the move, and to
Move,
recognize what
yeah,
the movement patterns look like.
totally.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. Well,
I
I'm
love
going to
you.
stop recording.
Okay.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hold on. I'm just going to stop recording, then we'll say goodbye.